Welcome to Can We Talk, a segment of the local scene, which is a production of PAC TV. We're here tonight talking to folks from all over the queer spectrum to gain insight into the LGBTQ+ experience through the eyes of the people who live it. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and I'm joined by Tiff, Emersen, Rick, and Bailey. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be an open, flowing conversation, and we're just going to follow the flow. So we'll jump right in. Your origin story. When did you first realize you were queer? Tiff, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think I've always known. I know I hear a lot of people say that, so it's almost become cliche at this point. I just always knew that I was different, but just didn't have a name for it. And when I eventually did come out, like the first family member I talked to was my brother, and he's like, "Oh yeah, like I totally already knew that. Like everyone knows that." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I think it's just had this innate like, this is who I am, and it's been pretty comfortable my entire life.
Your entire life you felt comfortable about that?
Yeah, it's one of the things in my life I have felt comfortable about. This is just who I am.
And how old were you when you first
14.
came out? 14?
Yeah, I was pretty young. And I think that comes from having a family who just didn't treat you any differently, you know? Like when I came out, people were just like, oh, okay, well, pass the salt. Like, you know.
Pass the salt
Yeah.
and pass the... Rick, would you like to?
Sure. I realized I was different very, very young. 6, 7 years old. I seriously knew that I was different.
Yeah.
And first grade, well, I liked the principal. I really did. Coming out, though, was a very different thing. I was older, but still young. And it was, in the caveman days. I came out at 16 years old in 1976. It wasn't the experience that Tiff just talked about. It was, nobody came out in 1976, and certainly not a 16-year-old to their parents. I first talked to my sister, who was aghast. And my parents, I told at 17 because I had to. I was caught.
You were caught. So your sister kept your secret?
Yeah, she did. I was caught at 17, and the next morning, my parents asked, "Who was that guy that I met last night?" And I said, and I ran through it quickly in my head, "That guy was exactly who you think he was. That's who he was." And my mother carried on. My father, well, I knew it. So, but it was a couple of months of being very awkward, but they came around. And this was 100 years ago, and my entire family couldn't be any better. But in early days, people said some pretty nasty things, but it wasn't like it is today, not even a little bit. It was very closed. But the gay awareness, because of Anita Bryant at that time, with gay adoption in Florida, it was on the news, so it was on people's minds. But it wasn't really accepted like it is today.
So we should inform people who may not have been born or remember that Anita Bryant was an activist, wasn't she? She was a beauty.
She was Miss America.
Miss America, and she was very anti-gay rights, anti-gay adoption.
Yeah,
and
it was
she made
specifically the gay adoption in Florida that she was protesting.
So that was commensurate with the time that you came.
Exactly the same
Wow.
time. Yep.
Wow.
It was you who pied her in the face.
Oh, I wish I did.
You dreamed of it. Bailey?
Well, my experience is definitely not as welcoming as Tiff's, but not as, maybe, I don't know, hard to compare, but my parents were really religious, so when I came out, not to my family, but to my friend, who was the first person I told, the day that gay rights, like gay marriage was legalized in America, because I was at church that day, and it just was like overwhelming, all of the negative like responses to it, like all this talk about how it's like the end times just because gay people want to get married. But so I had told my friend, and who had previously come out like a few weeks before, so it felt like a safe connection, you know. And a few years later, after I had started dating my first girlfriend, I told my parents. And it wasn't like taken super well because, like I said, they were pretty religious. But after a while, they just kind of like threw it on the back burner, don't really worry about it. And, you know, sometimes that's how it is. But
So take the approach of don't talk about it.
yeah, sometimes. Yeah. But a lot of my friends are super supportive, and I've gotten like a really good system surrounding me. So despite the negative thoughts of other people in my life, I have good, strong.
I'm interested in, you grew up with a religious background. Are you still religious?
I'm not personally, but I do have a lot of LGBT friends who still go to church and believe it, and may not agree with their like peers who do go to church and may not think that it's all right, but they hold fast in their beliefs, you know,
Is it
and I
their
respect
beliefs?
that. Yeah.
Emerson?
Well, I don't know. I think it's a wide-faceted term, queer, and I think I came out as bisexual first, I think when I was 14 years old, to my sister, and that was kind of just, everybody was like, okay, and it was literally, we just moved on. Nobody really said anything about it. And then I came out as a lesbian next, and then I kept switching, and I just kept saying different things for a while, for a year when I was 15, and then May 9th in 2016, changed my name because I didn't identify with the name that I had. And it wasn't because of anything, really, but my sister said, when I told her I was changing my name, she said, "Are you sure you aren't changing your gender, your pronouns too?" She says that it was like a little one-off joke, but I was like, huh, and it kind of got me thinking, and then May 9th, I came out as trans, female to male. So I don't know, I think I didn't really get many negative responses from any of my friends. I had a couple people unfollow me, but that was the most like direct thing. And
Unfollow you on social
Yeah.
media because social media.
Of course. But I would rather that than anything else. If they don't agree with it, then they just quietly, which is fine. I'm okay with that. I think that was the biggest thing I got, really, the worst reaction. So it's been pretty level, I think.
So you've talked about a journey of coming out as bisexual, coming out as a lesbian, and then coming out as trans. So can you go back and look at what that journey was like for you internally?
Still trying to. I think the biggest factor in doing all of that and like giving myself all these different reasons is every time I would look into the box that was like different in my head, I would look in for a second and then I'd run away. So I never took enough time to actually unpack it and figure out who I am, which I think is why it took me so long to identify that in the end, is just because I didn't want to take the time to look inside myself, I guess. It was so much work, it seemed.
So much work. Is that resistance to accepting I'm different, or?
Possibly. It might have been that. It might just have been... I don't think I had any aversion to being different. I think it was just having to tell other people that I was different and having to go through the conversations, I think, was probably the aversion in my head. I didn't want to have to tell everybody around me to call me something else and to make all this extra work to accept me, almost.
So Tiff and Rick, you both said that you knew at a very young age, and this is who you were, and you had wonderfully self-acceptance, and Emersen had a slightly different journey. Did you have any resistance to yourself when you realized, okay, I'm gay, and accepting that within yourself?
Yeah, I definitely would say so, because just like growing up, I truly believed a lot of the things that I was taught, like as a child, like in the church and stuff. And like kind of having that in my head was like telling me that no, I couldn't possibly be gay, because I thought that I was like, I don't know, gonna go to heaven or whatever, you know. But yeah, like after some time of like seeing other people, like meeting other LGBT people and seeing their experiences and seeing that like, I don't know, like it's okay to be different, and like it's something that is real and it's valid to be. And I can kind of agree with and relate to Emerson's statement about like trying to figure out the journey, because like at first I like was definitely afraid of it, and I knew that I was just different somehow. But like going through it, you kind of realize different things like gender identity and sexuality are completely different, like things that you have to figure out, you know, because like I identify as non-binary, so like it's kind of confusing when you're trying to figure out if like your sexuality, and that's completely different, like plate, you know?
And that's a really good point to expound on because many people are confused by the difference between sexual identity, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So would anyone like to tackle that?
I keep going.
You wanna keep going?
Sure. Well, a lot of the times when people, well, in my experience, I feel like when you start to figure out your sexuality, like, you kind of get it confused by thinking like, oh, maybe I present masculinely because I want to date women. But like at the same time, you could feel that way, but also you might be trans, you might be like non-binary, you might be like so many different, like it's a complete spectrum again, like same with sexual orientation. So it's like two different things that can sometimes coincide. And it's also like, it can be fluid. Like you can be non-binary and grow older and like you can feel like things change, you know, and you can be a trans man, you know. Like it's all something that can flow with how you grow and how you change.
There are two different things that can be completely fluid, right? So what can parents do to be allies for children or teens who are coming out, or young adults? How can families engender a supportive environment?
I think, I don't know, in the case of my family, it's a little bit different. They never treated me like, my family's not the type of people, they're not the type of people who would walk in a pride parade. Well, maybe my dad. But they're just kind of like, oh, this is Tiff, like, this is who she is. And, you know, I wish it would get to a point where we didn't have to come out, where we didn't have to have pride parades, where I didn't have to be like, oh, by the way, I'm a lesbian. I wish I could just come home and be like, this is my girlfriend, you know, and not be a big deal. And I think with every generation it gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, at the same time, I think right now the best thing you can do is just offer support. And if someone needs to be spoken to about how they're treating your child, you be that person. You be that advocate when your child can't be.
Yeah, I think above all, just listen. Listen, let your child, because it's so confusing for them right now, and I know it can be hard to understand when this person you've known their entire life and like you created is coming to you and telling them that things are different, but they don't know what's going on either. So I think above all, just listen and try and be there for them, because nobody knows what's happening. So we're all just on the ride together, I guess, if that makes sense.
We are on the ride. Yeah.
I like that.
And it's a tough world out there, right? So having a secure base might be something that's just important no matter what. Rick?
I think that parents have one job, and that's to love and support their children. Not to say that, you know, you have personal feelings about things, and you grow, you learn, you grow. Just because you have one reaction at the very beginning doesn't mean that you continue to have that feeling coming forward. You learn. Parents learn by, especially by talking to other parents who are in a similar situation. And, you know, your gay or transgender kids are just like your straight kids, only there's that little bit of difference.
Yeah.
People are people.
People are people,
People are
right?
people.
And PFLAG is a wonderful organization as a support group for families who have non-normative children, which we're all unique, right? And special. So do you feel any kind of obligation or a call to be representative within a community, say with your family? Like if Rick is the gay man, so do you feel like you have to speak for gay men in your no?
Not really.
Not in your family. Do you ever feel a cause to be representative?
I think so. It was hard. I'm divorced, so when, you know, I got married in 2012, and it was just after like the first generation of same-sex marriages where some of them were falling apart, and I felt like I had this like need to not be divorced because, oh my God, I'm representing the entire gay nation. But you have to remember that there's a 50% divorce rate. So of course that's going to include same-sex marriages as well. But yeah, I felt kind of like a failure at that point. Like I should have been representing, you know, my culture better. But really some people just fall out of love, and you have to just, you know, think about that.
So do you ever feel like people will ask you, like, why do trans people or do non-binary people, as if it's a monolith, right? As if you can speak for every trans person. Do you ever feel those invasive questions, or?
Yes, I worked customer service for 4 years, So definitely, because I came out and I had my whole transition in front of all of my regulars at the coffee shop I worked at, and I had in front of all of the area that I was in, the community. So it was interesting kind of watching them have to learn, so not like sort of informing them.
They're kind of going through the evolution
Yeah,
with you.
like everyone who never would have needed to look into this, like all the old people who get coffee for $1, who come in at 5 a.m. and then go home and just read newspaper all day. They come in and they see me in my Manly Man shirt, not.
A shirt
and
that literally says
Manly Man. Yes, I had a giant white shirt, letters, because I didn't know how else to tell people, and I didn't want them to misgender me every day, so it was just something easy to put on.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt, I don't know, working as like a face of somewhere, that people were asking me questions like this all day, because it was like a coffee shop, so it was a lower setting. They could feel like they could talk to me,
Yeah.
which they could, and I felt like I was like representing something for a long time, and I wanted to educate people. And I think I definitely fell out of that because I realized it's not my responsibility to educate the entire world, but I'm
Excellent.
there to do that if they need it, I guess.
So I'm hearing that you both sort of felt the responsibility to represent positively, but also letting that go. It's up to. So just by existing, where people are educating.
I personally am okay with asking questions. Like I would rather people know and get educated and be curious than just flat out be like you're unnatural and your lifestyle is. I'm okay with people asking questions. There are some questions that are not okay to ask, and like that's just like a personal thing. Like when it comes to like any kind of sexual behavior, like that's not any of your business. Or if it comes to like I you know, someone who's trans could probably speak to people asking about their genitalia, like that's not acceptable. But if you want to ask me like, you know, so the baby thing, like, do you want to have a baby? Can you be religious? Like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'd rather, again, people be curious and be educated, and it takes, I think, to love everyone is just to know everybody and to know different walks of life, and I hope that I can be educational for people.
Excellent. Bailey?
What was the question?
That's we
we
can
go?
move on.
Sorry.
We have no. That's quite all right. When you were talking about workplace, have any of you ever experienced workplace prejudice based on your sexual identity or your gender identity? Rick?
Yes, I have. I'm a hearing aid specialist and have been for 40 years. I am a person who it's not always apparent to people that I'm gay. Sometimes I'm misunderstood and they don't know that I'm gay at all. One time this is what happened. In my waiting room was a full waiting room with magazines, and there was a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and there was an article about David Brudnoy. I'm sure nobody knows, but we're going back in time. He had just come out, he had AIDS, and he was talking about his experience in the, I think it was a Boston magazine. So the man said out loud, and I was far enough away, and it just killed me. He said out loud, "Well, back in my day, when I was in the service, we would beat the shit out of that person." I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So there I am. I'm faced with what do I do now? This is a long time ago, and but still, I wasn't going to let that go. So I stood up. I walked over to him. I'm sure he never would have said it if he knew that I was a gay person within earshot. I walked over to him and I said, "Well, you'd have to beat the shit out of me too." And the wife, the color drained from her face, and he, you know, just kept up his bravado. But
Oh, he did.
oh yeah. Well, he didn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry," like a normal person might do. But that happened.
Wow. And is that a unique experience? Is that
Oh,
the only
yeah,
time?
it just doesn't happen. In my life, people find this really interesting. I'm Jewish and I'm gay. I've had more discrimination about being Jewish than I ever have about being gay. And people don't believe that, but that's the truth.
And do you live in this local area? You live
I
in this
do.
local area?
I live in Rainham. I grew up in Randolph. In the 1970s, when I grew up, Randolph was a very Jewish town. It was 90% Jewish. The public schools closed on Jewish holidays because nobody would go to school. So it was Jewish. And yet, as a Jewish majority as it was, still I was discriminated against for being gay. I mean, being
being
Jewish.
Jewish.
Yeah.
Bailey, have you experienced workplace discrimination?
No, not really. I think that for the most part, I've worked in Plymouth, local businesses, and everyone's been really great around here. You know. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you're young, too,
Yeah.
right? How old
yeah.
are you?
I'm 20.
20? That's young. Emerson?
I think the most, only through petty comments, like nothing horrible, but I used to work with this girl, and she was young, she was like 16, when I was 17ish, so we used to work together, and it would be just us closing together, and it would be totally fine. She was nice, we were friends for the most part, but she liked to ask me very personal questions about, just very, very personal questions, like Tiff was saying, her examples. And I usually wouldn't answer it, and then she would say things like, oh, it's totally fine, we're best friends, but you're so going to hell. But we're best friends, but you're going to hell. And I was like, okay. But that was kind of it, and I usually just laughed it off because it didn't really bother me. It was just kind of like bizarre that anybody would say that to another person, but it never really touched base with me at all.
Interesting. So it didn't bother you, and you said that you've received other petty comments, so they don't hit you because...
I think when people say it, I think I just mimic tones a lot. So when people say something laughing to me, it's just easier for me to laugh it off, honestly. And I think the way that we worked together, it was more of it was just the two of you together until you were gone, until you left that day. So it was kind of like I had to agree with her, or I just had a horrible, miserable day. So it was more of just to get through the day, I think, is I would just laugh it off, and then that would be the moment to be gone. And she wouldn't say another thing for a little bit, so it was kind of easier.
Yeah, so prior to working in TV production, I worked in human services that mostly worked with people with special needs. The time I was working with younger kids with special needs, and I present as, female, just straight female. So people are kind of shocked sometimes, like, lesbian? But, so at the time, I was married, and I was talking about my wife, and she had done something that morning, and someone, I guess, had reported me to HR that she felt that she was not comfortable with students being around me, because one, I would influence their lifestyle, and they would think that, my lifestyle was a natural thing, and two, she thought that I was into pedophilia, which is terrifying.
Is she conflated?
Yeah,
Okay.
And having to be called into HR for something like that is probably, I love kids, like I adore kids. I am a little kid, I am an aunt, like a very proud aunt. It gives me chills to this day, even thinking about being called into the office, and I knew after that job was not going to be for me anymore. So,
So how did HR...
they were super supportive, actually. They said, just, give you a heads up. Someone did make a complaint. We are an equal opportunity employer. And, they were very respectful. But how do you work with someone when you're kind of just looking over your shoulder all the time? I never want to be accused of something like that, because I definitely am not. And it was terrifying. It was a really hard moment in my life, because I really loved that job, and I love kids. But, I don't want to be scared all the time.
No. That's a good jumping off point. Do you feel that you have to be more aware of your own personal safety if you go somewhere, say with your girlfriend, than someone who is in a cis relationship?
It's hard because, sometimes people think we're sisters, sometimes people think we're friends, but my girlfriend, it presents as somewhat masculine, and, we hold hands in public because we're from Massachusetts, and we grew up with families who didn't care, and so we never really think about it. We do have conversations about, because we travel out of state and out of country, and we have conversations about places we cannot go. I can't hide my love for her. I can't not hold her hand. I can't picture just not being affectionate with her. She's the love of my life, and I never want to put her in a position where she feels unsafe wearing the clothes that she feels comfortable in as a person.
Right.
So it's something we constantly think about. Less so when we're in Massachusetts, because I really love this state and feel really comfortable here for the most part.
Rick, is that something that's on your radar?
Yes and no. I'm just me.
Yeah.
And I don't really look over my shoulder, although I should probably. People are always saying, be careful. I think people do fear for me, but I don't fear for myself. I am just who I am, and that's the way it is. You know, I've been this for a really long time, really long time. In 1991, I met my partner. We were together for 26 years. He passed away 4 years ago after 4 years of cancer. We were a couple. We were a couple, and it was not to be mistaken. Everybody knew it. Way back when we met in 1991, there wasn't even the idea that we would ever be legally married. That wasn't even a thought. Of course, we're not going to be legally married. Although in our hearts we were married, but
Yeah.
we were not going to be legally married. So in 2007, when marriage became legal in Massachusetts, we didn't jump because we were not convinced it was going to last. In fact, we were sure it wasn't going to last. So 2007, 2004 was when it became legal. In 2007, we saw that it wasn't going anywhere, so we decided to get married, and we did in 2007. We had already been together for 17 years, so we were an old married couple,
Yeah.
even though we were a new married couple. And you want to know what?
Yes.
Unbelievable how things work out. Joe had cancer, colon cancer, and if it wasn't for the fact that we had a marriage license, I don't know that in the hospital, all of those things, that I would have been allowed to, first of all, be there
Yeah.
and to make certain decisions when
Yeah.
he couldn't make a decision. I was that person. And if we didn't have a legal marriage, I don't know that that would have happened. So, you know, people way back when, well, don't call it marriage, call it something else. You can have all the rights of being married, but just let's not call it marriage. Well, people understand what marriage is. They don't understand what purple doorknob is, but they know what marriage is. So I really think that, you know, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the fact that we were legally married, I don't know that I would have been able to be with him in the
those.
hospital and through everything that we went through.
So that signifies the advancement of the
Oh,
times and
no doubt about it. No doubt about
life-changing.
it. And as we have seen, it has grown. There are still people who are not happy about it, but
Yeah.
you know, people have a right to live the way that they want to live.
Emersen, do you ever have to keep your own safety high on the radar?
I think similar to how you started, I definitely should, but I don't. I just am not focused enough to keep that in my mind all the time. I am so distracted anyway because I have so many things that I want to do that I wouldn't remember to keep my eyes out like that. But I do try and stay safe. Like I carry Mason things when I need to, but I don't think I'm more alert than anybody else should be.
What is your response to people who say that sexual orientation or gender is a choice? You know, we've heard when people say, well, if I feel like a pineapple and I identify, can I be a pineapple? What would be your pat response to that?
This
If
is
there
too
is.
costly to be a choice. I think, yeah, I don't understand why people would say that if they think that being straight isn't a choice. I don't know what I'm saying. I think it's a very difficult question to answer because it shouldn't be a question in the first place.
I hear that. Bailey?
Yeah, I think that like, why would like a trans kid in Alabama choose to be trans if he knew that everybody was going to hate him out there? You know, like,
Yeah.
why would people put themselves in that danger just to be like trendy? Like, it's something that is real and something that's valid that like people just are born with, and it's like, it's not something you can just pick off the shelf. I'm going to be gay today. You know, it's like something that it's every day. You know.
I think it can be both, though. I mean, I think people can choose. that conversation always makes me super nervous, because when people say like, oh, I can't choose to be gay, then there's a part of our society who says, well, then that must be a disease and that needs to be medicated if you can't choose, almost like a cancer inside of you that needs to be cut out.
And
yeah, exactly. So that almost scares me. I've met plenty of women who have been predominantly straight their entire life. They met one soul that changed their mind. Not necessarily about, maybe they would still date men if they hadn't met that one woman, but you fall in love with the soul. And I'm definitely a person who definitely believes that heart's not parts, you know what I mean? But that conversation kind of scared, why does it matter? Who I choose to love is who I choose to love, and that's it. It shouldn't even be a conversation for me.
I don't think so, personally. I don't think it's a choice. I know that it's an internal thing. There is a choice involved. The choice is, do you accept yourself? Just, that's the choice. The choice is to accept yourself or not accept yourself. And there are plenty of people who don't accept themselves. It's so unfortunate. These people live a lie. They literally live a lie. And I know some of these people personally, and I feel bad for them. But that's what they chose to do. They chose to live that lie. I don't do that. I chose to be who I am, and I choose to let it be known when asked, but I don't go out of my way to let people know. People don't necessarily know when they're talking to me, and that's fine. But sometimes, well, you know, I always feel like I have gay written on my forehead, but apparently I don't. Some people just don't realize. Even this week, I work with an older clientele for the most part, and somebody said, "Are you married?" And I just kept it simple. No, I'm not married. Oh, do I have a granddaughter for you? You know, oh, thank you.
Yeah. Moving on. Celebrities. So people are very bifurcated about this. Some people think that if a celebrity, if somebody who has a public platform is non-normative, then they should be out. Other people think it's their business. Where do you all stand?
Coming out is coming out is such a personal journey. It's really up to that person. I don't care if you're a celebrity or you're me. Like, you know what I mean? I think I'm pretty famous. But it's such a private, personal thing. No one can decide for you, because then you're not living your true, authentic life. It's just...
Emersen?
No, I agree. I think there's so little personal time you have as a celebrity, I'm assuming. I don't understand why you would do that in the first place, but I think that coming out is just something that you should let people do by themselves, and if you try and jumpstart it, you can only damage them. It's really not a good thing to do.
True.
Right.
Bailey?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I am not for outing a person. That is the worst thing that you can do. But on the other hand, I am very much for a person coming to terms with themselves. You got to accept yourself first, and then tell other people the truth of your life. I'm totally for that, but a person has to come to that on their own terms. It isn't something that somebody else should decide for them. But I'm for helping that person to come to that place where they can tell other people.
So if somebody with a public platform has an opportunity to be a role model, it should be absolutely voluntary? Is that what I'm hearing?
Definitely. I don't think anybody should be pushed in the position of a role model, because you shouldn't be somebody if you don't want to be, because that could only be detrimental to the person that you're influencing.
Do you see yourself represented in the media? We've come a long way, but do you? And if you do, can you cite examples?
Personally, I think there's a lot more these days. Definitely a lot of like stuff like in mainstream like television and like music and stuff. A lot of LGBT artists like coming up, and like, but
Like
I don't
who?
think,
Like who?
right now like Lizzo is really big. Actually, I don't think she's gay. Never mind.
She says she's, I think she's a mostly pan. She doesn't identify
really?
at all.
Oh, okay, yeah. See, like people just choosing to just accept whatever happens. You know, people who are open to like just the flow of life, you know.
Yeah.
Celebrities are kind of going to that, and like artists like Haley Kiyoko is really influential for like younger girls these days, like and coming to terms with their own like who they are and just like seeing it as normal, and seeing it as something that is every day. Because when you hear a love song about like a girl loving a girl, it's like not too crazy anymore, you know, because that stuff's like on the radio nowadays. But I think in like television and stuff, it could still be like worked on, because I feel like a lot of movies and TV shows, the centric story is about their coming out, which like is not every gay person's life. It's like that happens once and then it's over. Like you don't need to write every single movie about it. And I think like other genders and like non-binary people are definitely something that could be seen more in television, I think.
As just an incidental.
Yeah, it's just like people living their life, because that's what we are. We're just people living our lives. Yeah.
Rick, do you see
Oh,
yourself?
I see celebrities these days that are very representative of me. I think of Anderson Cooper. I think of Andy Cohen. You know, people men of a certain age who are living their authentic life, who didn't always live their authentic life.
Good point.
So that's what I meant about, I mean, somebody like me, I knew through the circles that Anderson Cooper was a gay man long before he ever came out. But I wouldn't out him. You wait for him to come out, and then, so there are so many examples. And
Which is
so it's so awesome compared to how it used to be, people living in the closet. A closet is not a place to live.
Emersen, do you see yourself represented in the media?
I think when you ask that, there's definitely representation for trans people, but the only person that comes to mind is Elliot Fletcher, just because he's a trans actor who started as a YouTuber, and he started as a YouTuber to inform about his transition and talk to people and just like show other trans people. And then his last video is like him saying about how he didn't want to continue doing it at such a small level, and he was going to try and make it in acting. And now he's actually on the show Shameless and The Fosters and Faking It and things like that, and he's on them as a trans character and educating people from those shows and higher platforms like that. And it was really interesting to watch his journey throughout my transition too. So he's the first person that comes to mind just because he's on more growing platforms right now. But there's not a lot of representation, I would say, right now. I think it's definitely getting better, but it's not anywhere near it could be.
For a trans male.
Most things, yeah. For most, I think there's like all around. There's not a lot of representation in the media for LGBT people. It definitely is growing and better than it used to be, but I don't think it's anywhere near where it could be.
Tiff?
About 5 years ago, I saw my first like lesbian drama, and the character at the end didn't kill herself, and I was so excited because up until that point, like I grew up with like. There's a couple of movies. There's this one movie where this girl turns into an eagle and dies. It's like very symbolic, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like, why are people dying at the end of these movies? Like, there's no happily ever after for me. Is this what we're saying?
Yeah.
But it's not true anymore. There's more happily ever afters. There's people, you know, who walk into the sunset and they can be hand in hand with the person they love, and that's great. But there are also some interesting conversations that are taking place now where why are straight women playing, you know, M to F characters and that kind of thing. Like, why can't, because representation very much matters, as you can see from this panel. Like, we have a diverse panel, and that's fantastic, and that's what people want to see. They want to see themselves up there. They don't want another straight woman playing someone who's like a drag queen or someone who's transitioning to feminine. Like, it's just not fair. You know, for races, you can't have a black person play a white person and vice versa. So why would you do that for?
Interesting. So would you object to a person like Jared Leto several years ago played a trans woman? Now, is that objectionable to you, to anyone here, or?
I think there are trans actors who the part could have gone to, and that's the issue with it.
That being said, he played it with a lot of respect, and I appreciate him for that role. It wasn't him. It's Hollywood in general.
It's the casting.
You know? It is. There's definitely some typecasting happening, and it's just not right. You know, people, young kids who are growing up and transitioning and coming out, they should be able to see themselves like young black girls should see themselves. You know, everyone should be able to see themselves on a movie.
Gotcha. Okay. So, what is the importance of having Pride Month? Rick?
I go way back to the first gay pride in Boston. I was actually there. And I was like from outer space. I wasn't fully, I mean, I didn't know anything. I was really young, and I just happened. I happened to be in Boston that day. It happened to be the Gay Pride, and I was just in the right place at the right time. But still, I wasn't a part of it. I was still very naive, and I didn't know a lot of things. So I don't know that I really wanted to be identified with the flamboyance that went on. But now I really love the flamboyance. I just like people being in people's faces. I just love it.
Does it
Because it's the truth of their life. It doesn't mean that it's my life, it's their life. And pride is very important.
Why is Pride Month important?
So, it takes a certain amount of courage to be authentic and be your true self. And it's just letting people know that we've come so far. There's still a lot of way to go, but we've come so far. Let me just tell you, my nieces, my sisters, 2 girls, they grew up knowing Uncle Ricky and Uncle Joe. That's all they ever knew. So as they got to be older teenagers, now they're in their very early 20s, but they would say, why didn't you and Uncle Joe ever adopt children? Why? It just wouldn't have been accepted. That child would have been ostracized. Not that I really wanted to in the first place, but if I were a young person now, as a young couple, I would absolutely want to adopt children. But back then, it just wasn't even a thought. It wasn't like it was illegal. We couldn't do it. We could, but it wouldn't have been accepted. We wouldn't have been accepted, nor would the child in public school.
So the place of, so you're acknowledging and recognizing that things have changed so much in a positive direction.
So much. Yes, they have.
So you were there at the very first Pride, Boston Pride. Why is Pride Month still important, Tiffany?
Well, it's a time when I can breathe. Like, I look at Pride parades as, I'm different pretty much everywhere I go, I guess. Not everywhere, but like most places, and it's fine. I don't mind being different. I'm okay with that. It makes me special. It makes me who I am. It makes me different. But when I go to Pride parades and I go take the tea in and I talk to these kids who are just coming out for the first time and they see their first Pride parade and they're talking about and they're holding their hands with their girlfriends, and I see parents. My dad went to his first Pride parade 4 years ago, and he held a rainbow flag, and he was like, everybody's so nice. He's like, I'm going to come back again next year, and then the year after. And that's why I love Pride. I love it, because everybody can just be themselves, and you see just religious people walking hand in hand with gay people. You see parents saying, I love my gay daughter, I love my gay son, I love my trans son. It's the most wonderful, freeing, everyone feels like a family, and it's really important for people to feel those connections with people so they don't feel so alone. There's nothing worse than feeling alone. And that's why we have Pride, to take pride. That's who we are, It's a good thing. It's such a positive, good thing.
Bailey?
I think Pride Month is like super important because it just like is a time where I feel like people who are LGBT just like feel better to go out and like, I don't know, just like live their lives and just like dress how they want and like really just have like the spotlight on them for like a little while when like all year round it's just like pretty predominantly like straight cis like in just like
so is
in
it
advertisements
time of
and
celebration?
Yeah, it's just a time where you can kind of really just do whatever and just be you as much as you really can, and like it's nice to just see other people who look like me like out on the streets, because I feel like a lot of the time, like especially in Plymouth, it's not like too LGBT of a town, it's like a lot of just like other people, and it's nice just seeing like other queers getting out and doing stuff.
And I think it really boils down to this: the strength in numbers. When you're with people who have a similar feeling, it bolsters you and it bolsters other people, so that you can have the pride and you're not alone. This is what young gay people, before they come to, I'm the only one. Nobody else is like me. And when you're at a Pride, even the little kid in me is like, I'm not alone. And I always knew I wasn't, but
Yeah.
they were invisible. They weren't. But at a Pride event, and it's not just a parade, it's lots of different community events. You just feel strength in numbers.
Emersen.
I definitely agree. I think it's just the energy in the air. No matter how low you can get, when you're at Pride, it's just so like everyone's so happy. It's so positive. It's healing to be there. I don't know. I think it's good, like you were saying, for the Trans Boy in Alabama. Also, just on social media as well. Pride Month is like it's a hashtag. It's everywhere. You can't really escape it, which is such a good thing for a month to just not be able to hide that, I think.
So we're going to wrap it up with the last question. You feel that social media has changed the way that people experience their own coming into their identities, and do you think it's been a positive thing?
Yes and no. People are less scared now to say the things they want to say because they're behind a keyboard. So people are more willing to call you faggot from the comfort of their very own home. But also it does give the trans kid in Alabama, the gay person in Portland, Maine, that might not have the people they want around them, to connect with a community of people who just want them to stay alive. And that's okay. And that's a good thing.
Emersen.
I think that's difficult for me to answer because I've always grown up with social media. But it definitely helped me. It made it easier for me because I could look into and learn about everything that I was wondering. I could look up on like Ask FM or like, I don't know, WikiHow, like what is happening with me, I guess. There were answers for when I wasn't comfortable enough to go to the people around me. And I think that was definitely beneficial.
Social media, what's that? I run a Facebook group. When I started, I had no idea that it was going to grow to almost 30,000 members.
Wow.
All local, all on the South Shore. It's a restaurant review group.
Let's give it a shout out. What's the name of it?
Oh, it's Hockomock Swamp Supper Club and Desserts Emporium. Please join. What we do is restaurant reviews and recommendations. You might put out there, where's the best Italian food in whatever town, and people will say, or you can write your review, good or bad. That's what we do. Do you think I cower from who I am? I don't. Everybody knows it. And, I don't think I've gotten any bad, well, that's not true. I have gotten some comments, but as an administrator of a Facebook group, I just kick them out. And,
That block is very valuable. Bailey?
I definitely think that social media has been a great impact, like positive for me in my like journey through figuring out who I am, because I didn't really like in the religion that I grew up in, it was very closed. Like you weren't really exposed to many other kinds of people except for the people that you saw every week at church. And like once I started to use the internet and I was on like YouTube and Instagram and like all these different like Tumblr and stuff like that, you really get to form your own little community of people who are like you and get to like, if you had a bad day like with the people who don't really understand you, you can go home and like go online and talk to your friends who like really get you. And it's like good to have people who share their experience that you can talk to.
This was great, guys, and we're going to leave it there for now. And thank you for your open conversation and your open hearts. And thank you for watching. If you'd like to watch this panel again, you'll find it on our community channel and on our YouTube page at The Local Scene. From me and everyone here at PAC TV, good night.